Number 17. It has an algebraic expression. It says negative x minus y. Then it says where you have x, put a 6, and where you have y, put an 8. So you could see how I rewrote it. Negative 6 because it was negative x, and negative 8 because it was negative y. So negative 6 minus 8. You borrow $6 from me, and then you borrow 8 more. Now you're going to owe me $14. So this is going to be negative 14. Number 18 says find the sum. It's combining two negative numbers. It's combining negative 14 plus negative 18. And again, we could use the graphing calculator to do this, and you could push the negative sign, the one in parenthesis, 14, plus, and then that negative sign again, 18. But all you're doing is combining two negative numbers. And so 14, negative 14 and negative 18 together are negative 32. In number 19, 20, and 21, the rule for multiplication and division is actually pretty simple. And I have it written several ways here. With multiplication and division, if the signs are the same, either they're both positive or they're both negative, then the answer is positive. If the signs are different, then the answer is negative. So I always try to solve these problems first by just looking at the numbers. It says 3 times negative 6. So 3 times 6 is 18. Then I go back and I look at the signs, and it says a positive 3 and negative 6. The signs are different. So then, since the signs are different, the answer is negative 18. So I always do the numbers first, 3 times 6, and then I look at the signs. In number 20, 64 divided, it says negative 64 divided by 8. Well, 64 divided by 8 is 8. 8 times 8 is 64, if you know your 8 times table. Again, look at the signs. They're different. So the answer would be negative 8. In number 21, 70 divided by 10 is 7. That's the answer. Okay? But the signs are the same. It's a negative 70 and a negative 10. So then the answer would be positive 7. Number 22 is asking you to substitute negative 7 where you see t, and 3 where you see y. So 3 times t becomes 3 times negative 7, and 2 times y becomes 2 times 3. So do the multiplications. 3 times negative 7 is negative 21, plus 2 times 3 is 6. Negative 21 plus 6 gives you an answer of negative 15. Number 23 is actually a formula that's used to convert Fahrenheit temperature, the temperature that we use when we talk about how warm or cold it is outside. It converts it to Celsius temperature, which is used everywhere else in the world. So it says if the temperature is 95, put that where F is. So orders of operation would say 95 minus 32. You need to do that first because it's in parenthesis. So 95 minus 32 is 63. Next it says 5 times that, which is 315. Now all of that was over 9. So once you've done everything in the numerator of that problem, 315 divided by 9 would give you a temperature of 35. Number 24 is talking about the distributive property of multiplication. And basically, if you look at the illustration, the distributive property means, you would look at orders of operation and say, well, 10 plus 8 is 18, and then multiply times 2 gives you an answer of 36. I agree with you on that. That's how we would solve that problem. But what it says is use the distributive property. The distributive property means that you would say, since there's a 2 outside of the parenthesis, it would be 2 times 10 plus 2 times 8. And that's what we mean by distributing the 2. You have to multiply it times the 10 and then multiply it times the plus 8. The commutative property is basically just called a switch. Okay? The commutative property, whether it's in multiplication or in addition, 2 plus 3 and 3 plus 2 are saying the same thing. So here it says negative 25 times 6. So if we switch those numbers around, the 6 would go on the outside and the negative 25 would go on the inside. You're still going to get the same answer. I have more review of this coming straight ahead. The commutative property of addition or multiplication. They're commutative. In other words, you could switch the two numbers. 100 plus 8 is the same as 8 plus 100. 100 times 8 is the same as 8 times 100. The associative property means when you have three things that are together. For example, if I want to add three terms, the 2 plus 10 plus 6, I have to do one of them first. So let's say I do 2 plus 10, and then I add 6. Or I could have rewritten that and said 2 plus, and put the parenthesis around the 10 plus 6. In either case, I'm going to get the same answer. And that also works for multiplication. So this property is where you have three terms rather than two. Commutative is when you switch two terms. Associative is when you have three terms. The distributive property of multiplication we showed you. In this case here, we're saying 10 times the factor 50 plus 3, which you would write it as 10 times 50 plus 10 times 3. The zero property of addition. Basically, if you add 0 to a number, it doesn't change it. It's also referred to as the identity property of addition, because if I have, for example, 88 plus 0, the answer is going to be 88. So it doesn't change the identity of the problem. Now the zero property of multiplication does. In other words, if you multiply anything times 0, the answer is always going to be 0. The multiplicative identity is basically the number 1. In other words, if you multiply any number times 1, you're going to get that number. Okay, so 1 times 88 is going to give you 88. And just in review, the orders of operation for complicated calculations are as follows. Perform operations within parentheses, then the exponents. Okay, exponents would be squares and square roots. You'll see these later in the term. Then multiply and divide whichever comes first from left to right. And then last, add and subtract whichever comes first from left to right. In divisibility rules, a whole number is divisible by 2 if the digit in the unit's position, in the ones position, is either a 0, 2, 4, 6, or an 8. In other words, if it's an even number. 84 is divisible by 2 because the unit 4 it's an even number. Okay? Divisibility by 3. A whole number is divisible by 3 if the sum, remember this term I was talking about, the checksum of all of its digits is divisible by 3. So for example, 177 is divisible by 3 since the digits 1 plus 7 equals 15, and that's divisible by 3.